the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind,
and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind,
and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you guys talking. Strikes, we go round and round, don't we? But teaching specifically is one I want to talk to you about tonight. So many schools and educational places have the threat of strikes hanging over them. Many teachers are basically upping and going, leaving their profession. Do you think that we value our teachers enough? Could you ever be a teacher? I couldn't, but I want your thoughts on that. And hundreds of thousands of people are feared to get into mortgage arrears imminently. Are you one of them? Are we about to see a housing crash? Do you think the government should step in? Should they help you pay your mortgage? And if you rent, are you shouting at your telly, hang on a sec, why should they help homeowners? What about us renters? Can't they pay our rent as well? I want your thoughts on that as well. And do you have children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews? Would you help them get a job? Would you shoehorn them in? I don't know whether it's work experience, training schemes, whatever. Is nepotism a good idea? Or should your kids basically make their own way in the world? And cold, hard cash. Do you use it? Do you carry it? Have you tried to use it but actually failed because so many places now say cash-free zone? What do you reckon? Because apparently now more of us are turning back to cash. Is that a good thing? I want your thoughts on all of that. But first up, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story on GB News tonight. In his first visit to Scotland as Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak will hold talks with the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. The two leaders are expected to touch on a range of issues, including the NHS and the cost of living. He's also seeking to discuss Miss Sturgeon's push for Scottish independence. They'll make a joint announcement on their plans for government funding tomorrow. Meanwhile, the government says a meeting between the Health Secretary and health leaders today was good and constructive. That comes as new NHS England data shows ambulances took an hour and a half on average to respond to call-outs during the month of December. That's the longest response time on record. Details on pay weren't discussed in today's meeting, but Steve Barclay was warned he must address the workforce crisis. Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry told GB News talks are the only way forward.
Much better, surely, is to use the system that we already have, which is that people negotiate the basic safety levels, and you can see nurses running off picket lines in order to go and help when there is a particular crisis. Now, that's the reality. That's what's always happened. And we know that even if they do pass this legislation, it's not going to help with the current situation. The current situation can only be helped if the government stops playing games, sits down and talks to the unions and negotiates a deal.
Meanwhile, 100,000 civil servants will strike next month on the first day of February the 1st. The decision follows another meeting with the government, which the Public and Commercial Services Union has called a total farce. Union leaders met to discuss the ongoing dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. It follows weeks of walkouts, including the strike by Border Force staff over Christmas, and union leaders have said more money will have to be offered in order to prevent further strikes. And travel disruption has continued today for passengers in and around London, with strikes on the newly opened Elizabeth line. Members from the Transport Salaried Staffs Association and their sister union Prospect have walked off the job again over pay and conditions. The two unions rejected a 4.4% increase this year. Transport for London has warned of short notice cancellations and changes to schedules throughout the day. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the government needs to up its negotiations.
I don't want to see this industrial action. I want to lead a government that resolves these issues. Under the last Labour government, you didn't have a national strike for nurses. You had fair pay for nurses, and we think that you should be in the room negotiating, sorting out these problems.
The Northern Ireland Secretary has said there's still a way to go to resolve the row over the Northern Ireland Protocol. And a warning for those watching on TV, there are some flashing images next. The Irish Premier and the Labour leader met political parties at Stormont this morning to discuss the post-Brexit trade rules on the Irish land border. The DUP has been blocking the formation of a proper government until the protocol is dramatically altered or even removed. In news away from home, President Joe Biden is facing new questions about his handling of classified documents. All but one were found with a second batch of classified material in his private home in Delaware. We understand in his garage. The White House confirmed the files included US intelligence memos from his time as vice president under Barack Obama. The first batch was discovered in one of Biden's offices at a Washington think tank last November. He says he is fully cooperating with the US Justice Department on the matter. Russian mercenaries are claiming they have found a body belonging to one of the two British aid workers missing in Ukraine. The Wagner Group hasn't specified which of the two has been reportedly found, but they did say they had documents belonging to both Brits. GB News is unable to verify the claims, and the Foreign Office says it's supporting the families of Andrew Bagshaw and Christopher Parry while they await clearer information. Meanwhile, Ukrainian authorities say Russia has attacked a maternity hospital in the port city of Kherson. Video footage shows the aftermath of the strike with heavy damage to windows and offices. There have been no deaths. It comes after President Zelensky praised the resilience of his forces in the eastern Donbass region. Here, the singer Lee Ryan has been found guilty of racially aggravated assault. The incident happened on a British Airways flight last July. Ealing Magistrates Court in West London heard the former member of the pop group Blue also asked a female flight attendant for a kiss. The former pop star has since apologised for his behaviour. An energy watchdog says more than 3 million people in the UK ran out of credit on their prepayment meters last year. Citizens Advice says more than 2 million were being disconnected at least once a month, leaving them unable to turn on the heating or cook a meal. The charity's calling for a total ban on the forced installation of prepayment meters until new protections are introduced. More women will be able to get checked for breast cancer after the government announced £10 million in funding towards NHS screening units. The initiative will make screening more accessible for thousands of women, with 29 new units being set up. The investment will also see upgrades to ultrasound and X-ray units to better detect cancer using new and improved software. And finally, Chester Zoo has boosted its conservation efforts with a new arrival, a critically endangered chimpanzee baby. The baby boy, said to be in good health, has bonded well with its mother, which you can probably see if you're watching on TV, clinging as he is there to her tummy. And we understand the rest of the troop. He's only the 4th chimp to be born at the zoo in 5 years, but the first male in more than a decade. Hang on tight, baby. That's it. I'm back in an hour. Now back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Polly. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm with you right through till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside me the teacher and the author, Kevin Rooney, and Lord Daniel Moylan, who's a Tory peer in the House of Lords. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome.
Good evening.
Happy New Year. I think it's the first time I've seen you, I think. That last story, by the way, in the headlines, did you see that? The little baby chimpanzee, very cute. But I'm never really quite sure what I think about zoos, by the way. There's always a small part of me that I'm just not sure if I'm comfortable having these animals locked in these spaces, basically for us to go along and gawp at. Are you a fan of zoos?
I'm not a fan of going to zoos, and I do agree with you, there are some issues about them, but there are zoos that actually do preserve species, help preserve species, that would otherwise be endangered simply through, natural processes.
Are you a fan of zoos?
I'm afraid I like zoos, Michelle. I would defend them. I would.
Do you not feel a little bit bad, though? Like when you see, I don't know, like birds and stuff cooped up in cages?
Look, I understand where you're coming from in that, but I think zoos have moved a long way from the past where there were a lot of legitimate criticism. I had a season ticket for the zoo in London for many years when my young lad was very young, and I used to love taking him to the zoo and spending many a happy day there. I would recommend it to Londoners.
Do you? Oh, well, a little bit of a tangent there. So that's not really what I'm supposed to be talking about, but that little cute chimpanzee there, I couldn't resist. What do you think of zoos? Get in touch and let me know. Tonight, I want to talk to you about cash. Do you still use it? Apparently, we're starting to use it more now these days. I never use cash, do you? Mortgages as well. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people will be perhaps going into arrears imminently because, of course, the rate rises. Do you think the government should step in and do more? Nepotism. Would you help your kids? Would you shoehorn them in to the job? Have you ever had the misfortune of perhaps working for someone's kid who was pretty damn useless, really, but you had to suck it up because they were the boss's son? I won't be so bold as to say I've got examples of that, but you might have. Get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. You can tweet me as well if that's your thing, at gbnews. Lots of you have been getting in touch already. Barry says, no, no, no. He puts it in capitals. I always know it means business. The government should not help people pay their mortgages. They were warned before taking one out that interest rates can rise as well as fall. Interesting. On the teacher thing, Graham says teachers get massive pay, massive pension, 13 weeks holiday a year, so they should stop taking the mick. I'll be interested to see what Kevin has to say about that in just a second. Paul says, why should I, as a taxpayer, subsidise people who cannot control their spending? I guess, though, Paul, if someone's taken a mortgage out, however many years ago, at 2%, and now through no fault of their own, I don't know, it might have tripled. That's not their fault. That's not their, recklessness with their cash, is it? But you tell me. G says cash is king, always has been, always will be. And I love the fact they say that more and more people are starting to use it again. I'm not one of them, I have to say. And David, this made me laugh. Nicholas got in touch with a similar comment as well, saying thousands of civil servants going on strike. You don't think that anyone would notice, do you? Would you miss the civil servants, some of them, if they went on strike? Get in touch, you tell me. And of course, look, I always like these ones. We should do a little Surge GB News fashion reviews. I always say that every night because loads of people have got in touch tonight telling me I look like licorice, all sorts. I'll take that. So I will. Apparently as well, I look like a games console. I don't know what to make of that, but I'll take it as a compliment. Let's talk strikes, shall we? They're everywhere, aren't they? Railways, self-service, you name it. And now teachers could be next. I'm going to just cut to the chase because we go around, everyone knows what the issues are. People will say, you know, my pay's fallen, you know, I'm not valued, etc. Do you support teachers going on strike, Kevin? Because you are a teacher, aren't you?
Yeah. No, I do, Michelle. I think it has to be done. I think when you think about it, the government were offering near 5% to the teachers and inflation's at 10%. So straight away you're talking about a real terms pay cut. And that Institute of Fiscal Studies, the independent body that came out today in the newspapers, was making the point in the last 12 years, our pay has dramatically declined compared to where it was. So every way you measure it, teachers are worse off. And we're not really talking pay rises over the last few years. We're talking real terms pay cuts. That's the first issue. But even in its own terms, people might say, oh, you're selfish and all, you're a teacher. But the problem is the schools in this country, in England, can't get the teachers. There's a massive recruitment crisis. I think just over 40% of this past year, teacher places couldn't be filled at the teacher training colleges. And then if you look at something else, if you look at the average teacher in their first 5 years, I think I'm right in my figure, 1/3 or just under 1/3 of teachers leave the profession within 5 years. So there's something going wrong, Michelle, right? So at that level, at the terms of the actual pay and the terms of the actual conditions, you have to do something. And it's only going in one direction at the moment, and therefore I think you got to pull it round. But let me be honest before you ask, Michelle, because you're a good interview and you'll ask me, even from my own self-interest perspective, I absolutely want a pay rise.
But let me ask you this, right? Don't you think that you're already on quite a good thing? Because teachers get reasonable salaries already, good salaries actually, up to about 38 grand, I think it is, in England, for example. Yeah. You get about a quarter, 24% there or thereabouts pension contributions. As my fella that emailed in a second ago, you get about 13 weeks holiday. You got a job for life, Kevin.
I think, you know, and you know what, and some of the things that fella was saying and others are dead on, but let me give you a quick example. So first of all, by the way, on the pensions, good luck to our unions when they were strong at fighting for good paying conditions. Thank God we had a decent union. But see, tomorrow, my students, the year 12s, do their mock exam in politics. This is the A-level ones. So I reckon there's 22 in that class. It's going to be about 30 minutes per exam paper for me to mark. So that's my Saturday and Sunday, pretty much marking. And once you've marked all them, I'll write that up and I'll write a model answer, la-di-da-di-da-da. So what I'm saying is my Saturday and Sunday will be pretty much taken up by marking just that one group. And then what you've got is all the other classes I mark. So what I want to say to that fella and the other people who go, you've got 13 weeks holiday, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, loads of people are saying it to you.
So all I would say is the amount of weekends and evenings and all the rest of it are taken up with marking and prep. And by the way, lots of us teachers, from the goodness of our hearts, run extracurricular activities. For many years, I've run the school football team, the school debating clubs.
I can hear the violins.
No, I know, but
the violins are out. You've got them out on your
But the point I'm making is, and I swear to God, I'm not even looking for sympathy. The point I'm making is, if you just say, oh, they get 13 weeks holiday, blah, 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 it sounds as if we have it cushy. And what I'm trying to say, in the round, you know, we don't. But don't get me wrong, I don't want to be a whinging teacher. I actually love my job, but I do think there are things about it which could be turned around and improved, and it would bring a lot more young people into the profession. But just on the teaching, or just on the pay, Michelle, just to nail this, absolutely, I think teachers should go on strike. Why should we take a real terms pay cut to our wages?
Well, I've got a lot to say back to you in response, but I'm conscious that I've not heard from Daniel. I'm sure you've got a lot to say on this topic as well. Your thoughts?
Well, I'll try and be brief. What we're seeing here is the desperately dangerous, corrosive effects of letting inflation take off in your society. And that has happened because we've had central bankers over the last few years printing money like there's no tomorrow and telling us it wouldn't affect inflation. Well, now, it does. And when it happens, you get people who say, and it's understandable why people like Kevin say, why should my standard of living fall because the value of the pound has gone down in terms of its purchasing power? It's been allowed to go down. I haven't been responsible for that. The Bank of England did that. Why should I suffer from that? So it's perfectly understandable why people want to say that. And then what you see, of course, is that those who have strong unions they're mainly monopoly suppliers of labour in the public sector and in related things like the train operating companies. I know they're not publicly owned anymore, but they're very similar in structure. They're the ones who can go out and defend themselves. And they can go on strike and they can try and get a better deal. They have no regard and no consideration for people who are in parts of the economy where you cannot go out and effectively defend yourself. They are happy to be an elite class, able to put the barrier around themselves and try and protect themselves. I understand it, but it's not actually what you'd call fair. It's not something which is sympathetic to other people in society. And, of course, you've got to think about the consumer, if you like, as well. And the consumers range from the patients who don't get into the hospitals, who don't get treated, the kids who won't get teaching, presumably. I don't know what Kevin's strike is going to involve, but presumably there'll be kids going without teaching. The people who can't get journeys on trains because people are on strike, they don't count. But nor do the people who can't strike. They don't count either. A special class, and Kevin's happy to be part of that special class through exercising muscle. Don't blame him, but there's nothing nice about it. There's nothing to recommend, nothing to admire.
Yeah, and I've got to say, let me ask you this, right, because you all know this anyway. One of the unions, they balloted for strike action, right? And the ballot closed a couple of days ago, 3 days ago, whatever. And they didn't even get the threshold of half of their members.
Yeah.
So if it is so bad and everyone's so disgruntled and demotivated and all the rest of it, why didn't that union that's polled, 150,000 members in England, 10,000 in Wales, they couldn't even get half their staff to turn out and vote?
It's a brilliant question, Michelle. I think that's a frigging brilliant question. And I think part of it is the fact that a lot of teachers are actually demoralised and disgruntled, and not just with their lack of paying conditions, but also with their union. Sometimes they think the union's not fighting a good fight for them. But I found out about that when I came into the studio, was in the green room. I seen it flashed along in GBNews at the bottom. It's the NSUWT. That's my union.
Oh, so
that's
your union?
But that's my union.
You won't be going on strike.
But I would have first strike. But do you know what? Do you know what I would do? You heard it here first. I'd go on strike anyway and see if the government tries to say we're going to outlaw you. You know what I would do? Hold on. So this government can get elected in less than 50% of the vote. And they're going to dictate to workers all these rules and obstacles about us having a democratic vote and vote for strike. And if X amount of people don't vote in that ballot, then c'est la vie. Should we not have had Brexit then because not everybody went to the ballot box?
Can I help?
Can I just come back and tell you that I think you're being ridiculous? And then you can come back as well. But I think you're being ridiculous because the rules of the Brexit referendum were made clear. Whatever the outcome was, whether it was a majority, it would be implemented. So everyone knew the rules when they went in. I'm not going to get into Brexit debate because I don't have time. So you knew the rules. You know the rules of your union.
Like, my point is, Michelle, it's double standards. It's double standards from this government. Why are they elected at less than 50% of the vote?
If I was a head teacher and you went on strike, I'd fire you.
And guess what? I hope that all of my fellow workers would go on strike and we would defeat you, trying to criminalise us and trying to do us down. And by the way, Daniel, before you do come back...
I'm not criminalising.
I haven't even started yet.
But Daniel, but on your first point...
Do I get 3 or 4 minutes just towards the end?
I think they call it gaslighting. Is that the term, what you did to me? So people like me, because we go on strike, we're selfish, we're an elite class.
Here you are.
Blah, blah, blah. Hold on.
You've got the power.
So when you defend... Hold on, I smile at Daniel. When you attempt to defend your self-interest for better paying conditions, I am smiling at the arch-capitalist calling me selfish.
So do you want to respond, Daniel?
I have no idea what he's talking about there. Yeah, I just want to help him out. I can tell him what the legal position is. Unions in this country have a very privileged position in that if they go on strike lawfully, they cannot be sued for damages by the people who suffer. But if they go on strike unlawfully, they can. So you are perfectly free in this country. No, don't interrupt me, Kevin. You are perfectly free, if you want to go ahead and hold that strike. But I'll tell you, it will be an unofficial strike because the NASUWT will absolutely not do it. Because then every parent in the country could sue the union for the cost of getting replacement teaching for their kids who are not taught, and of course it would bankrupt the union. So you're completely free to
Daniel,
do it. Go ahead. Get your colleagues to do it.
There's 2 points. I'm tempted to get stuck into Daniel, have a good ding-dong with him, but try to come back to you slightly. There's 2 points. In terms of me, if I choose to withdraw my Labour, I will do it. End of story. I will not let a government criminalise me. But just to come back to you, hold on, Michelle. I want to come back to you. I want to. Well,
that's not giving you a criminal. That's not criminal.
You can fire me, and that would be great, because what you'll have is you'll be firing all these other people, and you'll have no teachers to take their place, and that's really going to improve things. Now, as it happens, I wanted to come back to your earlier point. The biggest union by a million miles is not my union, by the way, the NSUWT. It's the Education Union. And I think we'll see. My prediction is that the Education Union will be able to get over all the obstacles and blockages that this government puts in the way of unions in terms of when they vote for strike, and they will have a majority, even by the terms of the government, to vote for strike. And so I think that strike will happen. And if you take my school, as it happens, this is probably neither here nor there for your viewers, but my school would probably be about 90% the Education Union. I just happen to be in the NSUWT because they have a relationship with the FE College Union called NATFE, which I happen to teach in the past.
So your union, so this is this is not hypothetical, so you voted in your ballot closed on the 9th of Jan, so you didn't get your threshold, you got 42%, you needed 50. 9 out of 10 people that voted in your ballot voted for strike action. So you now know your outcome. Your union isn't going to pass strikes. So are you telling me that you are just going to go on strike anyway?
No, what I'm telling you is I think what will happen is, I mean, it's a moving beast because I just found this out walking in the studio. I think what's going to happen there is it's up to my union. I would always obey what my union says. Now, I suspect my union...
But you've just told me
hold on, Michelle. No, hold on. I think my union will probably say we're afraid to go against the government's laws and we won't go on strike. So what I'll do is I'll weigh up the situation in my school and I'll make sure I don't do anything if it happens strike action with the Education Union. I won't do anything to block or stop or deter them from achieving the victory in this dispute, and we'll have to see what that means when we get to it.
Any final thoughts from you, Daniel, on this topic?
No, I think Kevin's exhausted me on this, really. We know all the details of what he's going to do.
Daniel, it's a negative person attacks the person and not the argument.
Yeah, but don't interrupt him then. Go on.
Yeah. And we know all the things that he's going to do, but we know very little, actually, about how he is going to demonstrate that the kids in his school are not going to suffer from this, because that's not his primary concern.
Happy to have that conversation.
He's perfectly happy.
Well, respond to that point then. So don't you care?
I do. It's a brilliant point. I do care, and even though the teachers will always say we're going to go on strike or we take industrial action for the betterment of the children and the parents and the families and the state of education in the country, I would accept that when you go on strike that kids are damaged. I would accept that. And personally speaking, I think it's a price that has to be paid. Can we turn it back, if we're going to have the last word, to this government who refuse to even allow our pay to stay on a par with the rate of inflation, and we are getting a real terms pay cut, and we're supposed to just suck it up.
But a lot of people are. We've got.
So we should all suck it up, Michelle.
We've got very
absolutely not
economic situation right now, haven't we? For reasons out of the government's control. We had the ridiculous COVID response, which wasn't out of the government's control. Granted, you've got the situation in Ukraine, which is out of the government's control. It's not their fault that inflation is. It is okay. I get your point as well, quantitative easing, but ultimately, some of these component parts are outside of the government's control.
I don't agree with you. The government has a choice. The government can choose to give workers their pay rise. And by the way, we're not all suffering equally. That's the problem in this country. The wealthier you are, the richer you get. And the idea that we're on the... Hold on, Daniel. Hold on.
Just a moment,
hold on. You're interrupting me. No, I wasn't allowed to interrupt you. The idea that we're all in this together is absolute nonsense. Not everybody has been affected in the same way by this recession. Okay, well, that's it. So Daniel wins the argument. He calls it socialist claptrap. Wow, that was really eloquent.
Where's some evidence?
People at home can't
Where's the evidence for that?
The evidence for what?
Well,
our Prime Minister, the evidence is our Prime Minister is sitting there with £600 million in his bank, for example. I don't have in one. Hold on. I don't. Hold on.
No, he's not,
So what? What we have in this country is an unequal distribution of wealth, and so when workers go on strike, we are demonised by people like Daniel, large chunks of the media owned by the wealthy, and we're the problem. I don't accept it. There's a choice. Give the workers a decent pay rise.
So you don't have any evidence that the rich are getting better off?
Well, as it happens, Daniel, even before you, when we go to the adverts for GB News, I'll pull my mobile phone out and look it up and give it to you.
Well,
There's plenty of it.
What better cue than to go to a break? He's just said during the break he's going to get his mobile phone up. He's going to find the evidence to back up that the rich are getting richer. I'm looking forward to that. I'll see you in 2. Sorry, guys. I need to turn this down as well.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television and online, across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, the teacher and the author Kevin Rooney and Lord Daniel Moylan, who's a Tory peer in the House of Lords. We were just talking about teachers striking. Lynn says, Michelle, lay off the teachers. I've got many members of my family who are or have been in the teaching profession, and I know how hard they work. She says, not only in school hours, but weekends and evenings. You're saying, teachers worked all the way through the pandemic, setting up online work for the kids, etc. And the old chestnut of how many holidays they get makes me sick. If you think it's so easy, Michelle, you go and give it a try. Work still has to be done during the holidays, and the classrooms have to be prepared for the new term. Who do you think does all this, Michelle? The fairy godmother? Well, no, I suspect it's the teachers do this, and that's like most jobs. Often you have to work evenings, you have to work weekends, your holidays, etc. But Vanessa also echoes this sentiment. She says, with regards to teachers having all these weeks off, it sounds great, but the reality is they work hard on their evenings and their weekends. Simon says the teacher's right. People only have their labour to remove. It's the only power that we have. Matthew says, this striking is getting ridiculous. Teachers, really? As if young people need more disturbance to their education, Mark says. My daughter's a teacher. She's up at 6 to get her 2 kids ready. She gets to school at 7:30 and she carries on planning lessons until 11 p.m. Teachers only get paid for the school hours, he says. Yeah, Mike, I was a caretaker at a primary school and I've changed my opinion of teachers. They come to work at 7:30 and they don't go home until 6 or sometimes later. Divided opinions there, I think. What's yours? Get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Let's talk property, shall we? Do you have a mortgage? Where are you on it? Did you get quite a low rate and now you're panicking because you can see the base rate and the mortgage rates rising? Are you wondering how you're going to afford your home going forward? Many, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, it's worried, are going to get into arrears. It's got me thinking tonight, Daniel, do you think the government should step in and help people with their mortgages?
Well, we need to come back to this question, this poison of inflation, because everything we talk about, it comes out again. And the poison of inflation that's been unleashed means that we have major problems. That includes the strikes and the people losing value in their pay. And the only way to defeat inflation, to get it back down, is for interest rates to rise. And that means that people who are in debt, mortgages or whatever, are going to have to pay more interest. And if you say, and I'll be honest, I paid my mortgage off some years ago. So
right, so that's why you think the mortgage rate rate goes up.
You know, the many years I had a mortgage, we had to face interest rates going up and down. We didn't have, you know, this period since 2008 when interest rates have been artificially low. When I had a mortgage, earlier than that, interest rates would go up and down. We had to face it and manage it. And I'm terribly sorry, but that's what's going to have to happen because, frankly, if you're going to defeat inflation, which is absolutely crucial, you cannot say to people, we're putting interest rates up to defeat inflation. Oh, and by the way, we'll print some money to hand it back to you so that you don't even notice. It's got to affect behaviour. So I'm afraid it's going to have to happen, and people are going to have to pay it, and I'm very, very sorry for them. And if they thought they could carry on borrowing at artificially low interest rates for a very long time, and I can see why they were lulled into thinking that, some of them, I don't blame them, but it was always an illusion, the idea you could have interest rates of 1% and 2% or even less. That was never going to last.
No? Kevin, where do you stand?
I don't agree with Daniel. I think the picture that you paint, Daniel, is in the abstract. And what we're talking about is over 700,000 people who are in serious difficulty with the mortgages. So it means that if we just let that go and don't do anything, a section of those people will lose their houses and a lot more people will get into serious debt. Now, we can say, as Daniel has just said, that we have to control inflation, we have to let the market take its route. That's what you call TINA, the old dictum, there is no alternative. That was Thatcher's dictum. And it's a problem. We're better than that. It doesn't have to be like this. And just when we go right back to, and I mentioned Thatcher, that's an interesting moment when most people had their own house, or sorry, most people rented their house. And Thatcher introduced the notion that where you live can become a financial asset effectively, and that you should buy your house and so on, get a mortgage. What's really interesting further down the line is you get situations and problems like this, and what you get is certain free marketeers saying, well, that's tough. Now, even though I wasn't a fan of Thatcher's, encouragement of people to buy their own houses and privatisation, etc., it is what it is, and I certainly don't think we should just abandon those people.
What do you think they should do,
the government should step in with some sort of financial assistance. I'm not quite sure the A to Z of what that assistance would be, but I definitely think some package should be put together. And I know what you're probably going to say to me, Michelle. If I can read your mind, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. Will people who rent their houses be very happy about that? And they might say that's not fair, etc., etc., etc. And they would have a point. I would accept the fact that they raise a legitimate criticism, but the alternative here is to let hundreds of thousands of people possibly sink with their mortgages, and I think that's too high a price to pay without trying to do something about it.
Are you a renter? Do you listen to this saying, hang on a sec, why is this fair? Why should the government help people to essentially build an asset if they're not going to help me pay my rent? Is that your thoughts? Or do you think it's good? Yeah, the government should do more. There was a scheme, and I think it still runs actually, the mortgage interest support scheme, where basically the government would pay or will pay some of your mortgage interest. Essentially, it's like a loan, you pay it back when you sell your house or you transfer your house. Do you think we're heading for a property crash? And do you think a property crash would be a good thing?
I genuinely don't know. And, if I could predict what was going to happen to property prices, I'd probably have made a huge amount of money over the last 20 or 30 years, and I'd be a very rich person. I don't know what's going to happen to property prices. And the last thing your readers should do is actually listen to me forecasting what might happen.
Oh, I don't know. You're obviously a savvy guy. You've paid off your mortgage.
Well, that's
you know what you're doing.
Hard work, not through speculation. I think there are two contrasting things going on as far as residential property prices are concerned. One is we don't have enough of it to meet demand. That tends to keep prices high. The other is the cost of buying it through mortgages and the cost of getting a mortgage, the interest rate, which is the cost on mortgage. is rising, which tends to choke off the demand side. But how that'll play out, whether it'll be net up or net down, you need an expert on this.
And let's not forget, by the way, we mentioned inflation and stuff. So the Bank of England's target was 2% inflation.
Still is.
Yeah, but they didn't actually intervene and do a base rate hike until, December 2021, by which time inflation was at 5.39%. So some would argue if they were going to start that kind of increase, they should perhaps have started that a little bit earlier on. Lots of you guys getting in touch still about that kind of the teachers' strike. Lots of you. I would say that you're kind of divided at the moment on that one, but I do want your thoughts. Let me see what you're saying. Oh, cash. Tony, you're talking about the cash one, which is the topic I'm coming on to towards the end. You're saying cash is essential to keep us free from bossy governments restricting how we spend what we earn. Trevor, going back to the teachers' strike, isn't everyone in the well-paid public sector with the gold standard pensions wanting to strike and don't get sacked? He says if he went on strike in the private sector, he'd probably get a warning and then be sacked. I don't think they can sack you if you go legitimately on strike. So, if you've balloted your unions and you've made your threshold, etc. Rita says, why don't we all go on strike and see where that gets us? If you're not happy with your choice of career, do something else and stop moaning at self-employed people. Just have to get on with it, she says. Lee says, Michelle, I've got no sympathy for people that cannot afford their mortgages. And Ken says, the government never stepped in, Michelle, when the interest rate was 16.3%. So why should they step in now? You tell me. Should they step in and to what extent? What? What do you want them to do? Pay how much? All of your interest? A part of your interest? Do you think that should be free to you? Give me your thoughts, GBviews at gbnews.uk is my email address. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about nepotism. Do you have kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews? Would you give them a foot in the door, basically? Would you give them a job just because they're your relative? Is that a good idea or not? Give me your thoughts and I'll see you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
There, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Michelle Dewberry, till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, the teacher and author Kevin Rooney. He's been dividing you guys at home with his views on the strikes, and also joining me, Lord Daniel Moylan, the Tory peer in the House of Lords. Martin, you've just been in touch saying no one helps the renters. When the landlords up the rent, we've got to move out and find somewhere else. So why should renters, as taxpayers, pay people's mortgage so that they can gain an asset? Richard If you take out a mortgage and you don't budget or factor in potential rate rises, that's just you being financially irresponsible, Richard's told you. Do you think it's been a bit harsh, or do you agree with him? Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. Right, let's talk nepotism, shall we? It's in the headlines at the moment, basically, because the head of Dior has hired his daughter. It's got people talking about whether or not that's the right thing or not. Kevin, do you think it's a good thing to use your influence to shoehorn your kids into the roles?
Do you know what? There's almost something I want to say, which is the right sounding thing, but then I have to pinch myself and just tell the truth. And I think nepotism, as I understand it, is something that I would pursue, that I would do. For example, if it was my son and I had the chance to get him into a particular career job that I was involved in, I would do it. And I suppose that they would call that nepotism. You know, before I became a teacher, you know, I'm an electrician by trade.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, I'm an electrician by trade. So when I was a young lad working on the building sites as an apprentice, what was really interesting, all the apprentices that would come in were the sons of the fellows that were already working, the carpenters and the sparks and the plumbers, heating engineers and brickies, etc. And that was just, I never seen a problem with that in the slightest, right? But this is where I get like a little bit unsure about things. Sometimes you hear the argument now that in certain jobs and careers, maybe perhaps a lot of like black people or young working class people can't get their foot in the door of certain careers in the City of London in the past or whatever. And if you look after your own sort of family, you're maybe precluding those people from getting a chance to get up the ladder and have a fair crack at the whip. So even though I've just told you that I think I would pursue and accept a bit of nepotism and I would do it myself and my family, I do understand in certain circumstances it can perhaps be anti-meritocratic. So I'm trying to be as honest as possible and give you my answer, Michelle.
Well, I respect that. Daniel?
Generally, I'd be strongly in favour of meritocratic appointments, but I think there are two things to say. The first is, in the case of this particular company, which is brought this up, which is Dior, LMVA, which is the big brand, big company, it does actually belong to this guy. And when he dies, presumably it'll be inherited by his kids and his family. And I think it's perfectly okay if he says that they've got to have some experience with the business before they actually come to own it. So I think that's completely understandable. I think if it was a public company and you were just doing this, it would be much more difficult, it would be impossible to explain because you have responsibilities to broader shareholders and other stakeholders. But this guy, he's going to leave this company, presumably, to his kids. So they should know something about it. But the second is, I entirely agree with, I think it's very interesting, Kevin's point about the fact that in these in the building trades that he was talking about, fathers hand on skills to sons, and that's part of how things actually get done well.
And to the daughters?
That was very rare.
It was very rare, yeah.
Case. That would have been very rare.
Back then it was rare, Michelle.
That would have been very rare in Kevin, because Kevin's, you can just see him.
I'm not a spring chicken.
Yeah, you're not 21 anymore, right? Yeah, you've had
a bit of an antediluvian like myself. So that would have been rare. But it's also in other areas. So, for example, in music, like Johann Sebastian Bach, he had half a dozen kids. He trained them all to be musicians. They went on to be great musicians of the next generation. Mozart learned all his music from his father, who was a musician. This is what people were expected to do. If you had a skill, whether it was music, you try to hand it on, because it gives your family, it gives your own kids a chance to make a living.
Well, one of my viewers, Phil's, he's got in touch saying nepotism is completely wrong, because to your point, what he's saying is that then basically you're excluding other, he says, potentially better people from that role. I personally think, maybe this isn't the right phrase, but charity begins at home. I think you look after your own first. I would, assuming that my son was any good, I'm not going to shoehorn my kid somewhere. If he's a bit gormless or not up to the job, I wouldn't do that. But if he was good, up for it, I'd definitely use my contacts to open doors, get him in there. And I wouldn't, I don't think, if I'm being totally honest, I wouldn't stop and go, oh, if I get my son in, maybe I'm stopping that person, that person, that person. Because I would think my first and foremost priority is to my own, and then I'll branch out from there.
Do you know, I get that 100%. Can I tell you a secret? And this is going to create problems for me. My wife's going to go mad. I had a massive row with my wife a few years ago. She is much more successful than me, and runs a particular. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but she runs this particular, institution. Let's just say. And I was saying to her to get our young lad in for an internship. And she said to me, there's a queue of people from the best universities in the country have been queuing up for months and months and months trying to get an internship. I'm not going to take them. I said, he's your flesh and blood, get him in.
Yeah.
With a huge big row, she wouldn't take him. In the end, he didn't get to do the internship at her place. And that classically sums up the difference of opinion with the viewer and yourself.
Well, she could have done two. You could have had two internships, one for your kid and one for the other one.
I'll tell her that when I get home if she's not already viewing.
And as for you say she's more successful than you, she's not on GB News. Come on.
True. Well said, Michelle.
Get more successful than
what
that.
a great line, by the way. I like that one.
Right, I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk about cash. Cold, hard cash. Do you still use it? Do you still trade in it? Apparently, more of us are now reversing and going back to cash. I want your thoughts on that. I'll see you in 2.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing! You remind me of me in the European Parliament.
But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside me the teacher and the author, Kevin Rooney, and Lord Daniel Moylan, who's a Tory peer in the House of Lords. Lots and lots of you getting in contact about what we've been discussing tonight, teachers' strikes, nepotism, houses, and in a second I'll be getting in touch, I'll be talking to you guys about cash. Lots of you are not really in favour, I have to say, of the mortgage, the government supporting you to pay your mortgage. Eileen says many people now, Michelle, are using cash. I'll be talking about this in a second. It's too easy to run up debt with chip and pin. I think you raise a very good point there about debt. Michael says, of course, we need to keep using cash. Why should Big Brother know every single penny we spend and where we spend it? Christopher says, cash is king, and I hate it when pubs only take cards. Yeah, I don't like that either. But I have to say, I don't use cash anymore. The reason, by the way, that I'm talking about this is because you will have noticed that during COVID, basically, lots of companies, organisations said that they wouldn't take cash anymore. So our use of it was really kind of declining. But the use of cash now has risen for the first time in 10 years. Daniel, are you a cash man?
I think we have to keep a cash option. I mean, it's quite interesting. This gets debated quite a lot in the House of Lords, strangely enough, and there's support for keeping cash from all the parties, because the more left-wing parties see the problem that exists for poorer people, people who are excluded from getting bank accounts and credit cards and things like that. And so they see it as an issue of social exclusion, that if there's no cash option, what are these people going to do? And I understand that. But on the more conservative side, you also get people who worry about that, but they also worry about the fact that, like some of your viewers have said, you've got this Big Brother thing. And I'll tell you the way it hits me. You know, sometimes now you go into these coffee shops and they say they don't take cash. And then you say, well, how about giving me a receipt? And they say, oh, you can have a receipt, but I don't have a printer. So you can have a receipt, but only if you give me your email address. I think that's a bloody cheek. Actually, they're legally obliged to give a receipt if they're registered for VAT, which nearly all of them are. But you try it out on them. You say, can you give me a receipt? And they'll say, yeah, give me your email address. I think it's a cheat.
But I say that. I have that often when I go to shops and I'll say, oh, can I get a receipt? They'll say, what's your email address? And I'll say, no, I don't want your email, I just want a receipt. And I do get a receipt. Kevin?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's interesting that the cash has gone up again, and I wonder, is that just a simple issue of people are really conscious about how much to spend, and when you're tapping that with card, it doesn't mean much, but when you actually see the paper cash disappearing from you, it's a more vivid, recollection of the fact that you're spending a lot of money. So it's a very interesting point that I didn't know until you raised it, Michelle, about how cash is now increasing. Look, I completely agree with a couple of points that Daniel made there around social exclusion, what some people call digital poverty. But I don't have online banking, and I use cash. I don't have online. I know people more than you would think who don't even have a bank account of any description.
Really?
And I don't have a credit card.
Yeah,
Would you believe that? And the thing about it is that those people still exist. There's a lot more of them out there than you think. And I know that more and more people are into online banking and cardless cash, but I think in a country of around about 65, nearly 70 million people, I think there's a fair few million that prefer the old-fashioned way. And the point that I would really raise, and I don't want to be coming across as a conspiracy theorist, but Daniel sort of tangentially touched on it, it's the point about anonymity. I like when I'm doing things not to necessarily have a trail.
Why? What are you up to?
I'm not up to anything bad.
I've never ever thought to myself, I don't want a trail.
Isn't that right? I don't know. I think deep inside there's a libertarian in me that just doesn't like people to know what I'm up to, and I like the freedom to go and do what I want to do, give somebody some cash, buy what I'm buying, walk away with no trail that can ever be detected.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think it's important, actually. It's an important opportunity, an important means of maintaining liberty and autonomy, actually. In the good old days, you paid a fare on the tube and you paid your fare, and that was that. Now, you use your Oyster card or your cash contactless payment or whatever, the whole thing is traceable. Is that comfortable? You see the television dramas. Now, I love watching police dramas, Michelle. And it's where's the CCTV? Get the credit, trace the credit card. Right. Where was this all done? Right. And so that's how they solve crimes, because they're watching it all. It's there the whole time.
Never mind, it's not just cash, by the way. I often think the people that know more about you at places like your supermarkets. Like when you have these point cards, they know so much about you. They'll build these big, huge databases. That is the future. Data is one of the most valuable commodities. Doug says, Michelle, the problem is if you don't carry cash, you can't chuck money in the tins of homeless people, etc. Yeah. Well, I don't know where you live, Doug.
They all have the little thingies now.
I was just about to say, I don't know where he lives, but everyone that I see, even the buskers and stuff, they have these little card things. And when you say...
they don't give receipts either.
They do not. And when you say, no, really sorry, I don't carry cash, they'll whip that out from their pants and away you go. It's no excuse anymore. Michelle, everyone should be responsible and make sure that they do use their cash. Do you think, by the way, it should be illegal? I think it should be illegal. Actually, an organisation can say, we won't take your cash. I think that if cash is a legal tender in this country, organisations should be forced, basically, to take it. Carol, you've emailed me in and said, what is the definition of success, Michelle? That is an interesting one. I'm going to pick that up another day. That's all I've got time for tonight. Kevin, Daniel, thank you very much. Thank you to you at home. That's something nice for us to ponder, Carol, tonight. What is the definition of success? What does it mean to you? But for now, Nigel Farage is up next, and I'll hand you to him. Nigel, good evening. What have you got for us?
Good evening. Almost unnoticed this week, Sir Mark Rowley, Commissioner of the Met, has said that increased use and targeted use of stop and search could reduce the murder rate in London by 50%. But of course, many think it's racist to do so because disproportionately more black people get stopped than white people. We'll debate tonight. Is the new boss of the Met right about this? I have to say, I really rather think that he is. But before all of that, let's get the all-important and increasingly awful weather.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Turning very windy out there at the moment. It'll be blustery on Friday as well, but the winds will steadily ease, and for many, it'll be a bit of a drier day tomorrow. Still tonight, though, we've got low pressure nearby, and the isobars really squeezing together. It's turned very windy now across Northern Ireland. That wind could cause some disruption, possibly a bit of damage, and certainly some issues with ferry crossings and other public transport could be affected too. The strong winds then transfer over the Irish Sea into North Wales and parts of northern England. So again, a very blustery night here with showers coming in for most areas too. But much of the east and south will be dry, and that strong wind will stop temperatures falling too far. We start tomorrow at 4 or 5 Celsius. It'll still feel cold in that wind tomorrow morning. Plenty of showers for Northern Ireland, Wales, northwest England and northern Scotland. But much of eastern England and much of the south will have a dry day, and even the showers in the southwest should tend to fade. In fact, most places becoming dry by the afternoon, but some showers still feeding into southwest Scotland. Some sunny spells, and the winds will ease through the day, but that wind will make it feel quite chilly with temperatures 7 to 10 Celsius. More rain to come then during Friday evening, initially spreading into Wales and Northern Ireland, but another mass of rain then comes swamping in as we go through the early hours, bringing a soggy start to Saturday for the vast majority. Maybe a bit drier in northern Scotland. The rain hitting the colder air across Scotland, so some snow on the mountains. Should start to ease from Northern Ireland on Saturday morning, and then the rain tending to pull away from most places by Saturday afternoon. So it will turn a bit drier, but it's staying blustery, and there will be more showers to come. Double digits across the south for a time, but actually it'll probably turn colder as that rain pulls away, because that rain's got some mild air mixed in with it, and as that pulls away, look at the map turning blue. It is going to get colder through the weekend and into next week with the return of frost and ice.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News.
Frank